ordinary people took stock of the carnage and resolved that the death, the suffering, and the awful loss would not be in vain. That the Great War would be the war to end all wars. That they would always remember those who had died or who suffered in the cause of peace. Look down, wrote the soldier poet Pictou. Look down and swear by the slain of the war that you'll never forget. And so at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month of 1919, the first anniversary of armistice, our nation stopped to remember. Throughout the land, in the schools, in workplaces, on the street, and in the homes, Canada stood still and observed 2 minutes of silence. There was hardly a family which had not been touched by the Great War. Canada as a whole mourned for what had been lost and for what would never be. But there was also pride. Pride in the achievement of our young nation and its soldiers. Pride in the conviction that death and suffering had not been in vain. Pride in the knowledge that Canadians with origins in all regions of the world had truly become a nation. One whose people would remember. That was expressed in many ways, but perhaps not so moving on the headstones of Canadian soldiers buried in war cemeteries in France. We know now that the Great War was not the war to end all wars. Within 20 years, our servicemen and women again were called to fight, first in the cause of freedom and decency. Our troops, for the first time anywhere, turned the tide, and finally we and our allies prevailed. Again, there was grief and pride and gratitude. Again, we prayed that there would be no more war. But then there was Korea, then Malaya, then Vietnam. There was conflicts in the Gulf. And then, of course, the United States operations in circumstances of real danger which called for strength, determination, dedication, and now Kandahar in Afghanistan. Today, the Great War has become World War I. And Armistice Day has become Remembrance Day. Yet we, particularly our young, who hold the future in their hands, must honor Remembrance to remember. On this day. So it is, the Remembrance Day is now a day in which Canada and Canadians pause and remember the sacrifice of all those who died or suffered. And it is this day in which their memory and their honor, we as individuals and as a nation renew our commitment to peace. Each of us here today is conscious to the nearness of the unknown Canadian soldier buried at the National War Memorial in Ottawa. For me, his tomb has become the true heart of our nation. The unknown Canadian soldier who rests there continues in death to serve, by enriching our commitment to peace and by reminding us of the sacrifice of all those who died or suffered for Canada in a time of war, lest we forget.